Hello, I'm Rob Satloff, the executive director, the Segal executive director of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. I'm delighted to welcome you to this very special event. We're now in the middle of the fourth week of the war against Iran and Iran's proxies throughout the region, such as Hezbollah. Bombs have been falling across the Middle East. At least 12 different countries have been targeted in the course of this conflict. We at the Institute have spent a lot of energy focusing on the military, strategic, maritime aspects of this conflict. Today, we're going to take a different look. Today, we're going to look at the home front on some of the receiving countries that have been targeted by all those Iranian missiles and drones. Next week, I believe, we're going to have another event looking at the home front inside Iran, examining the human situation among the people of Iran at this time in the middle of this war. I'm really delighted that today we have three outstanding journalists, commentators, political observers to give us their view of the home front from Israel, of the home front from the United Arab Emirates, and the home front from Jordan. Each country having received hundreds of Iranian missiles and drones, or in Israel's case, also hundreds coming from Lebanon, from Hezbollah. So let me introduce our panelists. First, I'm very pleased to welcome Yonit Levi. She is the chief news anchor of the nightly news on Israel's Channel 12, and she is the host of the wildly successful podcast Unholy. I'm delighted that she is joining us from Jerusalem. Yonit, welcome. Also joining us is Nadim Kotesh. Nadim is a Lebanese Emirati, the former general manager of Sky News Arabia, a columnist for Sharq al-Awsat. He is here in Washington briefly, in between his stay living back in the Emirates. I'm delighted that Nadim could join us during his travels. Nadim, welcome.
Thank you.
And joining us from Amman, Jordan, is Amr El-Sabela. Amr is a strategic analyst, a columnist for El Ghad and the Jordan Times, a university professor. I'm very delighted that you, Amr, could be joining us from Amman, Jordan. All right, let me just begin by asking each of you, briefly, three adjectives to describe the state of the home front in your country. And then we'll dive more deeply, but let's just get this headline. Three adjectives. Yonit?
I would say resilient, tough, and tense.
Resilient, tough, and tense. Nadim, what are your adjectives?
I would say, the three adjectives is vindicated, composed, forward-looking.
Forward-looking. Vindicated, composed, forward-looking. All right. Resilience, tough, and tense from Israel. Vindicated, composed, and forward-looking from UAE. Determined, resilient. We'll come back to you in a minute, Amr. All right, Yonit, let's dive into this. Resilience, tough, and tense. Explain.
I don't know. I actually like Nadim's as well, so I was wondering if I could steal them, but I'll stay with mine for now. I will say this: it's war here. I mean, on every level, in the sense that we have sirens around the clock everywhere in this country. Personally, I woke up 3 times tonight, and of course, waking up means getting up, hearing the alert, going to a safe room or to a public shelter, coming back 3 times a night. That is, equals no sleep. That's been 25 days. And to add on that, of course, schools have been closed for 25 days. That means parents around the country are now, amusement centers and education centers. And this, of course, comes on top of 2.5 years of a war that started on October 7th. So I would say, again, Israelis, very resilient, can deal with this for sure. And I think feel like they don't need the explanation of why Iran, the Iranian regime, is a threat to this region. but also that it is, a tense time. We are sitting here, Rob, as I told you when we started the conversation off camera, that at any moment I might need to step out because there is a siren and we need all to go to the safe room or the closest shelter. So that has been our lives for the last 25 days, an acute emergency state, again, on the cusp of 2.5 years of feeling like this with different volumes.
And Yonit, is it any different today, 25 days in, than it was on day 2 or 3? Is there a trend line here that you can identify?
You mean in the sense of the sirens and the alerts and all of that?
And how people are reacting to it?
Well, I would say two things. First of all, the sort of frequency of it is not differed dramatically from day 1 to day 25. Of course, the minute Hezbollah began shooting at Israel as well in salvos that are pretty intense, particularly toward the north, that became even more difficult. Look, when we started this on day 1, the statistics were that the data was that 81% of Israelis supported the war. Just to compare, I think the data on CNN at the time was that 41% of Americans supported the war. Maybe that has something to do with the fact that we are 900 miles from Tehran and New York is 6,000 miles from Tehran. But if you're asking me if the data has changed dramatically, the last poll we published here on Channel 12 is that 66% of Israelis say that they are all in all satisfied with the way that the war is managed. 27% say they're not satisfied, and 7% do not know. So there's still a very high support for this war even now.
Okay, thank you. Nadeem, let's turn to you. Israelis have gone in and out of bomb shelters for years. The Emiratis are not used to having rockets and drones attacking their homes and cities and schools. Tell me about vindicated, composed, and forward-looking.
Instead of the bunkers, we have amusement basements in Abu Dhabi. You've been in. So the houses in Abu Dhabi and in Dubai and in the UAE in general are equipped with amusement basements, not bunkers like in Israel. And you've been there several times, and you can attest to that yourself. You're spot on that we're not used to that. This is a new feature. But the most interesting new feature actually is what Yonit said. This is probably the first time in the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict that you have an Israeli and an Arab in different cities living the same conditions, waiting for the same sounds, reacting identically the same to this unprovoked, vicious aggression, at least as far as the UAE is concerned. So this is something new. This is something new on the psyche of the Arab-Israeli sense of commonality in the region. Back to my adjectives. The UAE spent years being told and lectured by Western think tanks and policymakers and politicians that it is paranoid about the danger of Iran, the danger of political Islam, and that we are always missing the diplomatic window. This war actually, like any Emirati who follows politics, have this sense of we told you so, a real sense of we told you so. And this is not the vindication of someone who argued a position and turned out to be right. This is the vindication of someone who argued the position, paid a price out of the position, and survived the targeting and watched their analysis being confirmed in real time. This is a categorically different order of vindication when it comes to the geostrategic feeling in the country. The composed adjective, and you know that, Rob, better than anyone else, the UAE public, almost uniquely in the Arab world, takes its emotional cues from the institutional confidence in the country rather than from the street pulse or energy or whatever it is. When we've seen MBZ, the president of the UAE, in Dubai Mall in the second day or the third day of the war, and then at the end of the first week, he visited one of the hospitals and made his very clear statement that Iran is an enemy and the UAE is not an easy prey. This injected more sense of confidence and compounded the existing sense of confidence. the war took place during Ramadan, and that was a confusing metric to watch. The restaurants and the tourism and everything, that the activity of the DNA of Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Post Ramadan, after Eid, Dubai is full again. The restaurants are fully booked. The airports, against all odds, are operating, and I'm a living example coming from Abu Dhabi 2 days ago. So the composure was not passivity in any sense. It was deliberate. It was almost a defiant act, dressed as or presented as a strategic self-confidence.
Okay, very interesting. We're going to come back to this relationship between the people and the government in just a little bit. All right, Amr, welcome back. Hopefully everything's been resolved. I got 2 of your original adjectives, determined and resilient. So give me the third, and then explain how this reflects the people of Jordan, who have received, by last count, about 250 drones and missiles attacked. Not many got through, but still, that's no small experience.
Yeah, the third adjective I was saying, like, concerns and confusion.
Confusion.
Because simply determination is among the security apparatus and the military. When you talk to them, you see how determined they are to face, to stand up, and to protect, and realizing the matter and risks that Jordan is facing. The second is concerns, and I think this is among elite. This is really concerning, realizing the risks that Jordan is facing. Confusion, I think it is on a popular level. You hear like different opinions, but this has been always the case in Jordan. In Jordan, we suffer too much, actually arguing always problems of the region rather than talking about our internal problems. So it is becoming a very clear trend to have this kind of conflict visions, support pro and against, etc. So all the debates on social media at the end ends up like supporting Iran or against Iran, etc. So basically, I think these adjectives can describe the situation in Jordan on the 3 levels. But I think this is also an invitation for the Jordanian decision makers. It has been really serious in recent years, and especially with the spark of this war, that the Jordanian issues and the Jordanian matters are at least of the priorities, which means we talk too much about problems in the region, but we don't talk about our problems. We talk and we take positions always supporting or against, but at the same time, it has nothing to do with what Jordan really needs and what Jordan should do. And this is something, if I want to dig in the past, I think we have to rethink some serious issues to reach a kind of conclusion in Jordan, which is maybe the national identity, because this is one of the topics that might be today one of the reasons why society has been motivated in moments of risks and dangers, how they feel united, how they feel how to face these risks and dangers, and at the same time to think that the unity of Jordanians inside to face what is coming and what is targeting Jordan. I think this is very important. Jordan has been suffering for so many years from the domination of a religious identity. And the religious identity, we have to agree that it does not recognize borders or nations. So mobilizing people always based on a religious identity, especially in some cases, you try to portray any war or a kind of war from a religious dimension. And this is something ends up like forgetting about the priorities that you have to do.
So, Amr, Nadim referred to the emotive power of the Emirate people seeing their leader, Mohammed bin Zayed, come out after day 3 or day 4 of the war, walking the streets of the mall. Now, in Jordan's case, the king of Jordan flew to the Gulf and visited key Gulf leaders, Arab Gulf leaders, and offered signs of solidarity. Did that affect how people back home viewed this conflict?
Well, this is a very important step in the idea of the brotherhood with our brothers in the Gulf. But the point is, we have also to rethink our national narrative, our local narrative. Like, we need also to have something locally, like paying too much attention as well to regional matters in recent years made a kind of vacuum in the Jordanian political arena inside Jordan. So prioritizing Jordan, talking about Jordan, what Jordan really needs. The problem, what I can sense from people, that they don't realize the risks that Jordan is facing, whether from Syria, from Iraq, what's going on, even now in this war, and how this might be really serious for a country like Jordan. And it's a moment, like, I don't want people to panic or to fear, but I want them also to realize that this country is facing a serious challenge. This country needs everybody now to stand tall and feel that he's Jordanian. And so this is the point, that we can do good diplomacy, regional, like international, but I think we are missing something local, which is our local narrative. This is something to rethink, to reintroduce, and I think this is the best moment for the Jordanian decision makers to think how to reproduce a Jordanian and reinvent a Jordanian narrative that make people feel or belong more to the Jordanian matters rather than splitting on opinions on regional issues.
All right. Well, so you're talking about countries that split on opinions. You come from a country that...
Why are you looking at me, Rob?
You come from a country that is deeply split on opinions. Now, day one of the war, the leader of the opposition went on national TV to declare that, we're going to suspend our differences and all join in the war effort. I'm referring to Yair Lapid. How has that played out over the last 25 days? Has there still been politics in Israel the last 25 days, or is it really all the war effort?
Well, I would say this. First of all, Israelis definitely come together at times like this. And you did mention the head of opposition saying, we're putting everything aside and we are all here together. I mentioned that right now we're talking about a 66% of the Israelis in our recent poll saying that they are satisfied with the way the war is managed. This is more than the support that the coalition has. So we have to say that the coalition is getting the support of the people. Generally, Israelis don't need to be explained, to have any explanation of how dangerous Iran is to the region, ballistic missiles, a nuclear arsenal, the way that they trained at least two terror armies on Israel's borders and amassed them and funded them. So Israelis are very much in this. Of course, we cannot forget that this is an election year. I think we should notice that the opportunity to go to early elections has passed, and we will see elections probably not in June, but I'm sorry, definitely not in June, perhaps in September or October. There's never no politics going on, and critics of this coalition will say that they're continuing a lot of their legislation, even though the war is still on. So there is that going on, but you don't hear a lot of criticism of the war itself. If someone is opposed to this coalition, they will ask questions about, wait a minute, you told us 8 months ago that this existential threat has been taken off the table and now we're fighting Iran again. But you won't hear, I think, many Israelis who are asking why this war needs to be fought.
And Nadeem, to what extent has this experience of Emiratis being on the receiving end of all these missiles and drones, how has it affected people's political views of America, views of Iran, views of regional issues, views of national priorities? What impact has it had on those issues?
Wow, this is the $1 billion question. Actually, the meta point is that Iran is no more an abstract enemy. Iran is the enemy for this region in so many ways, at least from an Emirati perspective. UAE was not an observer of this war. It was not an audience for this war. We were the subject of this war, and disproportionately so, to be honest. Any future discussion, when people come to talk about this war or study this war, whether students, diplomats, military academies, any discussion will be conducted in the light of that when Iran chose to target the Gulf, it targeted UAE disproportionately. This is a fact that is imprinted in the UAE psyche. And I think the country will reflect on what enemies mean and who are the enemies and who are the friends of the UAE and the GCC in general. But I will keep my notes UAE-centric in a sense. The second thing, and back to the vindication, there is a sense that whatever the UAE leadership did in terms of the UAE-American strategic relationship, they will double down on that. In terms of the Abrahamic Accord, they will double down on that. And I think this comes across not as the right decision that have been made or right policy. This comes across as a prophecy from day one that compounded this unique sense of trust between the UAE people and the leadership. So again, the threat outlook, the animosity outlook, and the geostrategic structure of security and policy in UAE is being reinforced. And again, people are looking forward. No one is now asking if this war will spill over or will. It's already spilling. The question is, what kind of Middle East will emerge from this? And there is so much sense of urgency around that question, whether from the public, from the investors, or from the policymakers. And I don't think we haven't heard the lexicon in Abu Dhabi around UAE, around Iran is unheard of. In day 6, I guess, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, in his visit to the hospitals, he said that to our enemy, I would say the UAE is not an easy prey. Using the term enemy is a lexicon turning point. Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, in one of his tweets, he described the Iranian aggression as terrorist acts. This is not only a smart way of choosing words. This is a total a change in the outlook of how we see Iran.
All right, thank you. So Amr, I know you earlier you highlighted your hope that this episode makes people look at Jordan, at Jordanian national interests, at Jordanian internally. To what extent has it given Jordanians an opportunity to rethink things like their relationship with the United States, their relationship with countries around the region? Is there this rethinking that is going on as a result of this?
I think yes, it is a must, and I see signs, like many signs, of people start to argue even publicly the issue of what is the Jordanian real interest and what is the Jordanian narrative and what we really need in Jordan and who is the real enemy for Jordan. I think these things has been recently becoming part of the public debate. But still, I think in a country like Jordan, where decision-making processes is an easy issue, this is a patriarchal system. And in my opinion, we need to rethink how to adopt a realpolitik approach, because this is the benefits, the interests, and the stability of Jordan is based on realpolitik. It will never be linked to populism, and there should be clear distinction between populism and politics. And this is, in my opinion, will be one of the most important issues that will lead people to start seeing things differently. It will change even the way Jordan is doing politics. It will be more productive, more efficient. It will be seen in the eyes of allies as an important an important player. You cannot be seen like in a way important if you don't do productive policies, if you don't do changes inside. So I think we are again we missed many chances in directing the Jordanians toward the Jordanian interest, to prioritizing the Jordanian interest. I think this would be the best chance for Jordan to do that. It is to start thinking as Jordanian, to think of Jordan, the Jordanian youth, the local problems that cannot be solved with rhetorics and statements and following just regional politics. It has to start from within. And I think starting from within will give us a chance to rethink of important issues like the Jordanian national identity, it should be the pillar of the coming future of Jordan, because without a clear identity in the mind of people, I think our problems will never finish, and will be always driven by ideological parties, by religious identities, by, let's say, any trends going in the region on behalf of the Jordanian interests. So I think in the moment of danger, in the moment of risks, the situation is offering you a golden chance to redirect the attention toward your local audience and to your local problems, and motivate what I call the national sentiment, which I feel that has been missing for a while in Jordan.
Okay, thank you. Just before I move on, I want to invite all of our viewers, if you have questions for any of our panelists, please join this conversation either by posing your question on the chat of your Zoom bar. You all know what I mean by that. Or send me an email directly to rsatloff at washingtoninstitute.org. That's RSATLOFF at washingtoninstitute.org. And I will try to get your question into our conversation. Yonit, you said that there's now still a substantial majority of Israelis that are coherently and cohesively behind the government and how it's prosecuting the war. How do you think people want this war to end? Wars, I mean, the Gaza war ended in a gray zone with some considerable unfinished business still in Gaza. How do people want this conflict to end?
Well, I'll be very honest with you, Rob. I haven't slept for 25 nights, and the bomb that fell in Tel Aviv was 800 meters from my house this morning. So let's start with the war ending with us going back to a full night's sleep and no more sirens and bombs. And to be a little less, superficial on that or skin deep, I would say, we are three different people from three different countries in the region, and I think what is really even heartening to listen to is that we're describing very similar situations. And I think perhaps a very similar goal. I think we would all wish for, on the best case scenario, a different regime in Iran that is peaceful and a region that can learn to live with each other in a better way. Perhaps that will take longer than expected. I mean, we're prepared for that, but something that is, I think that is the best case scenario. I think Israelis are also looking at the fact that the cooperation between the United States and Israel is intense and pretty remarkable, also on the military level. But if you ask me if we want this to end, I think that the best case scenario would be a regime change, or at the very least, if this regime stays in the way that it is, not an attempt to threaten Israel or the other countries in this region, and not any way to attempt it or to succeed in doing that in the next couple of years.
And let me just press you a bit, Yonit, on the other front.
I did mention not
Lebanon.
Sleeping for 25 days when you want to press me a bit, Rai. Just going for the little bit of guilt there. Yes, of course you can, Rob.
Let me press you on the Lebanon front as well. It was a year and a half ago, Israel had a ceasefire with Lebanon. You were able to withdraw from almost the entire country. Now you're back, and you may be back for quite a while. What do people think about this?
I mean, paradoxically, obviously, the Iranian front is a bigger deal than the Lebanon front or the Hezbollah front. But I think that we know or are more clear on how the Iranian front can end. And I think in any way that it does, whether it's the best case scenario or a mid case scenario, Israelis will still feel like they won, like the nuclear threat has been, taken back, like the ballistic missile threat has been somehow contained. And they will feel, I hope, good about that. I think Lebanon is more complicated because, first of all, it is closer, right? And so rockets, for example, being fired from Lebanon have no preliminary warning. It's a much more dangerous, particularly for the north. And as you say, we thought this was over. There was a pager operation in September of 2024. A deal was signed in November by the Biden administration. So there was this feeling like, we're done with that. And we now realize the Israeli public realizes it's not, and it's going to be a more complicated thing. I think for Netanyahu, again, in an election year, and with his base, it will be more complicated for him to go for a deal. We do see the Lebanese government in some way, and I'm sure there are people on this call who are more experts on that issue, perhaps stepping up. I think that is something that Israelis are looking for. But in a way, this is a more complicated front to close or to arrive at an end of that part of the war.
Okay, thank you. Nadeem, from the Abu Dhabi point of view, how would they like this war to end?
Well, there are many priorities on the UAE mindset, but I would touch on three of them. The UAE's greatest fear is not an Iranian victory. This is off the table, obviously, and I second what Yonit just said. But regional fragmentation that disrupts the economic system of the UAE that the UAE has spent 2 decades building is a major fear. So we need an outcome with an Iran that is contained, unable to project any sense of power beyond its borders, and to be left with no capacity to reconstitute. This is very important about the outlook of the diplomatic window that is now in place. So people want this war to have a ceiling, a defined end, not an open-ended unraveling. The second thing, there is a genuine interest, more than people might expect, in an Iran that emerges weak but functional, not out of sympathy, not out of fear, but out of cold strategic logic. A collapsed Iran is far more dangerous neighbor to the UAE and the GCC countries than any reconfigured one. The UAE does not want Somalia with the size of Iran on its borders. Third, what UAE wants, and this is very clear in the UAE statements, messaging by Dr. Anwar Gargash or the Foreign Ministry, the Emiratis want the post-war architecture to formally acknowledge what the UAE has been arguing for years. There is this sense that the region is not heard enough from the Arab Spring days and Obama days till now, from even the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And you remember the Prince Saud al-Faisal visit to Washington in that sense. So there is a genuine sense that the West, and in particular Washington, doesn't pay enough attention to what the region has to say about the developments that touches their interests directly. So Emiratis want this post-war architecture to formally acknowledge what the UAE has been saying and arguing for years, that Iranian expansionism and political Islam are the region's primary destabilizing forces. The question in the UAE is very simple. It's not who will win the war. The war has been won in so many ways, but who gets to design the peace in the future Middle East? What is the political and geostrategic outlook or architecture? These questions are very important, and they will determine whether the past 4 weeks meant anything lasting.
Okay, we're going to come back to this because you said something very interesting. You always say something very interesting.
Thank you.
That Emiratis fear that the United States doesn't pay enough attention to the Middle East. There's quite a powerful undercurrent in the United States that we pay too much attention
No,
to issues of the Middle East.
I didn't say it doesn't pay attention to the Middle East. I said it doesn't take enough cues from the Middle East stakeholders on the issues that they are engaging within. I mean, I can tell you, I can remember with you the debate around the 2015 JCPOA. We can talk about how the Arab position around the invasion of Iraq in 2003, Barack Obama and Hosni Mubarak. So there are many episodes, turning points in the Middle East, where the region felt it was not listened to enough in terms of what does that mean on the longer term for them.
Okay, all right. Amr, how do Jordanians hope this war ends? And how do they see themselves as part of that ending?
No.
Benefiting or paying a price for how this ends?
Well, this takes me back to the word confusion that I used, because you hear like different opinions. And I have to be honest, sometimes I cannot agree with many of these opinions, but it's still there. Some people say, like, yes, a strong Iran coming out from this war means that they will insist on their hostile and aggressive policies toward Jordan. And this is something that we've been living with as a nightmare when it comes to trafficking, weapons, drugs, and attempts to infiltrate the Jordanian system, recruiting youth, the new rhetorics of jihadism reintroduced by the Iranians among youth, which is something that's been like as a nightmare. But at the same time, you hear people saying, look, but even a victorious Israel in this war means that Jordan should face like new policies from the Israeli side, just like imposing policies from the Israeli sides on Jordan, especially when it comes to the West Bank issues. So you hear these opinions, but I think the security point of view is the most important one, which means like I need a new era where I don't have these threats coming from everywhere, from Syria, from Iraq, or from like internal attempts to infiltrate the Jordanian system. The issue of drones attacking Jordan, drugs, Kiptagan, money laundering of Shia militias in Jordan. All these things, I think we need to guarantee that after this war, we have a total shutdown of these aggressive policies toward Jordan.
Okay, thank you. So Yonit, I have a couple of questions that have been sent in by viewers. Let me ask this one of you. Israel and all these other countries are now on the same receiving end of Iranian missiles and drones. Is there opportunity that emerges from this? Is there opportunity for peace diplomacy, for building new relationships among countries that are all effectively on the same side of dealing with Iran?
Yeah. I mean, may I be as bold as to say, I think it's a question for all of us, but I'll take that first. I would say that, I mean, hopefully, and I think that Nadim is right in saying this war is won in the sense that, you know, it's still the two very powerful armies taking on this nefarious regime. So I think that is true. I think we all are hoping for a very clear ending for this war, that we will be very clear on the fact that Iran is weaker, that this regime is weaker, if not more than that. And yes, there are opportunities, first of all, to better enhance the relationships that have already been carved out and made in the Abraham Accords, for example. And of course, the other question, the big question, is Saudi Arabia, and how does that work into, is that possible? Is a normalization possible? Does the region, and again, the thinking of the GCC, is it, if this war ends and Iran is not as weak as we had hoped, what does that mean for the region? What does it mean when the region is, Nadim said, is one of his adjectives is forward-looking. So if the region needs to bet on 5 or 10 years from now on the American administration, would it think that that is the best bet? There are a lot of open questions at the end of this, but obviously, hopefully, what we are looking at is a strengthening of ties between the countries in this region.
Amr, I got a variation of this question that came in for you, which is, normally Jordanians are very critical of Israel, but it's not Israel that's bombing, that's sending these missiles and drones. Do you hear less of that public criticism these days in Amman?
It's hard to hear less in Amman. There's something that we have to realize that I think Jordan has peace treaty with Israel, but I don't think that there was real normalization of relations. On the opposite, I think recently the discussions also covered by diplomatic statements, which like in a way triggers as well this public sentiment, and it kind of legitimizes this when it comes from like diplomatic statements, always critical to Israel. And I think this is a two-way scenario. Like I cannot see normalization happening in Jordan. I don't see this critical tone is getting less, even if it's not Israel who's bombing Jordan. And I don't think there was as well attempts from the government side to highlight as well the benefits that Jordan has from this relation when it comes to a peace treaty, security coordination, or let's say water, gas deal, etc. There was never a kind of a highlighting in numbers of how Jordan is benefiting from that. And this is what I said before, the realpolitik policy, which means you have sometimes to highlight for people things. You cannot impose on people their sentiments, what they have, but at least you have to put things clear. And I think this is something missing when it comes to Jordan. And regarding the critical tone, I can assure you that it will not go less. What I'm seeing, it will grow even more and more. And after these 2.5 years, you'll see that on the cultural side, we missed a lot of things, like in a way to deal with. And I think, especially after the war in Gaza, you know, Hamas is not far from the Jordanian society. Actually, I have to say that Hamas was born in the Jordanian society. And I used to call it the first child of the Jordanian Muslim Brotherhood. So when it comes to Hamas, we have to realize that the culture of Hamas that's been growing and dominating the political scene in Jordan since 1987, rhetorics, talks, figures, etc., till the day they left Jordan in 1999, I think their presence was very strong. And all signs show that their presence still in Jordan is very strong. Before the war, we have key figures of Hamas coming regularly to Jordan. And if you notice the Hamas statements during the war of Gaza, there was no statement, no public speech by any leader without directing things to Jordan, asking Jordanians to demonstrate in front of the Israeli embassy or to topple the Western interest, talking to the tribes, like in a way, not just to the Palestinians in Jordan, the Jordanian tribe, asking them to go to the borders, etc. This means that there is a full understanding of the Jordanian structure and the situation in Jordan by Hamas. And I think this ideology, which is the Muslim Brotherhood ideology, was dominating the public scene for years, because back to the point, you don't have a strong national identity and you don't have a national narrative. And at the same time, like it ended up like Islamizing the society means at the very end today that people, their way of thinking or their judgment is becoming based on what they feel or what their convictions, which means like we left the society for one actor to shape the cultural identity. So I don't think and I don't see the tone is changing toward criticizing Israel or making the normalization of relation an easy mission.
Very worrisome. Thank you for explaining that. Nadeem, this question for you. Over 2,000 drones and missiles hitting the Emirates. When is the Emirates going to shoot back at Iran?
No, we're shooting back. To be honest, I mean, we are still in a defensive position. We are like intercepting more than 95, 96% of the projectiles from Iran. And this is not by chance. This is by design. The UAE is not willing to get into a destructive war with Iran that will turn into, something similar to what happened between Iraq and Iran. So restraint is not a lack of strategy; it is the strategy. And to be honest with you, Rob, there is no upside to the Emirati intervention in this war from a military perspective. It will only complicate the battlefield in a way that is unneeded. So I don't see that there will be a visible intervention on the Emirati side in this war. But most importantly, let me touch on how this war might shape the Abrahamic Accord and the peace in general. Because I agree with you, the comments coming from Jordan are a little bit worrying. We have a lot of soul searching to do as Arabs and Muslims after this war. There is a sense among the elite in the region that for the first time they are in the same battle with the Israelis against a Muslim country, between brackets. So this is like a cultural shock. This is against anything they are used to, and it requires sober soul searching on what does being an ally or an enemy in this region. And that's very, very important. And that's an elite state and institutional grandiose endeavor to pursue. And it needs critical and strategic and moral clarity on every single level. My conclusion and the UAE proposition in that sense is that the war did not interrupt the Middle East path to stability or peace. It revealed that there was no path in presence of Iran. And it's not about 7 October, how it hijacked the Saudi, for example, normalization. If you go back to the mid-90s, to how they financed and funded the suicide bombings, how they basically, and that's one of the funny things, poetic funny things in history, that Iran back in the mid-90s was voting for Bibi Netanyahu, not for late Ishaq Rabin. Our ally was Ishaq Rabin. The Arabs who look like me are allies of Ishaq Rabin. Iran was with Bibi Netanyahu and Ben Gvir. And Rabin was killed by that cult somehow. So Iran has a long history in hijacking peace, and having a region now without Iran, without its capacity to hijack peace, is very important. And that has a practical side to it. That's not only theoretical. So for the first time in decades, any Arab leader contemplating normalization with Israel does not have to calculate the cost of Iranian proxy retaliation as a serious variable in his calculus. So this is a seismic shift in the normalization calculus in the region, but it has to go hand in hand with brave, courageous, clear-eyed soul searching on what does it mean and what do we need from this coexistence with Israel. I mean, Jordan signed in 1994, but it's still a very cold peace. Egypt did the following. The Emiratis have a totally different proposition in that sense, and I think this will prevail with time.
Yonit, do you have any reaction to what Nadim just said?
I would say, since you did mention that this country is deeply divided, and at the end of the day, I mean, it is quite a remarkable thing that we in the past 6 years have went through an epidemic, 5 election cycles, October 7th, a war with Iran, and still the most dividing question in this country is Netanyahu, yes or no. That has not changed. That is constant. So I would just say, I mean, I think that just to make the note that if you're a Netanyahu supporter, you would say Netanyahu has been saying for 35 years, Iran is the biggest enemy. I mean, when the United States went to Iraq, there were many leaders here, including Ariel Sharon, saying, don't attack Iraq. Iran is the big enemy for this region. So just to make that a note, and I think if the word is vindication, then Netanyahu and his supporters would definitely feel vindicated about what is happening now. But again, to return to the important question, which is how And I think Nadeem is right on that. How does this region move forward, and how we can strengthen the ties is a question. This hasn't derailed us in any way. Actually, the opposite. It put us all on kind of the same side of this story, and that is a remarkable thing.
And I want to ask each of you before, while we still have time, about the leader who is the key motivating actor in this war, Donald Trump, and the perception of President Trump and his leadership of this conflict, and of his overall leadership of how America is approaching issues in the Middle East. How is that being translated into public opinion in your country? I'll start with you, Nadeem.
Well, that the UAE-American strategic relationship is crucial to the general outlook of my country, and we rely so much on doubling down on that. Having said that, we trust that the instinct of President Trump is in the right place, and that's a very important thing. And to that, you have to tie another fact, which is the decision-making process in Washington is a little bit unconventional these days, in the sense that President Trump is one of the most accessible presidents in history, and many stakeholders lobby him day in, day out on doing things, and there is no institutional depth to the decision-making process in Washington these days, and that's worrying to us, because one day you're talking about Hormuz is not important and oil supply is not the question. The second day you're giving ultimatum 48 hours. On the morning you have a tweet that is flirting with the nuclear option, and in the evening you have news about Kalibaf talking to J.D. Vance and others. So there is so much mixed messages here. We are definitely concerned about the strategic clarity in Washington, but we have full faith that this partnership that has endured for 5 decades will continue to be a foundational pillar of our security and going forward.
Okay, confidence in the partnership, concern about strategic clarity. Yonit, how would you frame it?
You make me sound smarter. Thank you.
It's not needed. You sound too smart. That's annoying to begin with. I will say this. I remember when Donald Trump was in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, in October 13th, the day that the 20 living hostages were released, and he received a standing ovation from both sides of the aisle. I think that won't happen in Washington. It did in Israel, because the right support him, and for reasons that are pretty clear, I think, and the left supported the fact that he ended the war. And now I think, first of all, Israel's looking at this cooperation on every level and being very happy and pleased about it. I would say that we are following two things. One is what Nadeem mentioned, the sort of unpredictability of this administration, right? I mean, it was weeks that we were following, will Trump start this war or not start it? And now we're following, will he end it or not, and when and how? And the other is the voices coming out of the president's own party that are becoming more and more loud and worrying for Israelis. We're following this very, very closely. Very anti-Israel voices, I think, and also in some respects also anti-Jewish voices. And so that is something that Israelis are also following very, very closely at this time.
Okay, thank you. And Amr, the view of Trump in Amman these days.
Well, I don't think, again, we have to differentiate between who's seeing Trump. I think from a political point of view, he's been an ally to Jordan when it goes to numbers, like helps and aids to Jordan, support, military support. I don't think that you can have just but a positive perception. Still, we have a different Trump today. It's not Trump of the first administration, where it was linked to the deal of the century, Jordan being secluded, etc. So I think, he's seeing and he's repeating always the importance of Jordan. So it's very positive. On public level, you have also two visions. You have the critical, just per se, because he's the American president and he's Trump. The second, I think many people are starting to see Trump differently simply because he showed a lot of consistency, what he's been through, what he did. He proves that he's a unique, strong person. And I think many people started to admire as well the determination that he has and the way, in the Arab world, we love the strong leaders. Strong leaders who impose things. This is a patriarchal mentality that we've been dealing with for centuries. So I think there is also a very positive vision towards Trump. Strangely, the dominant one is negative, but I think many people started to rethink on how to see Trump.
All right, thank you. Last question for you, Yonit. You said earlier that most Israelis hope this war ends with fundamental change in Iran, regime change, more transformative change. If it doesn't quite go that far, but the war ends in the near future, will that still be victory?
I think so. I think, look, when you live in this region, Rob, you always have to hope for the best but expect the worst. I think that even if we won't see, and I think we all assume that we're not going to see a regime change tomorrow morning, but that if Israelis can say to themselves that the nuclear program has been taken back years, that the ballistic missiles are not a threat to Israel the way that we're seeing that they are right now, I think that they will, and of course that the infrastructure has been decimated, the military infrastructure has been decimated. Let's say that from the conversations that I have had with top-ranking officials, military officials in this country, they say we don't have a plan. Even if the regime doesn't fall, we don't have a plan that in 8 months we're going back to this war, because that will be unsustainable in the long run. I think that Israelis will feel that if the threat has been diminished in a dramatic way, that will also be considered a victory in their eyes.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you all. Amr Sabela from Amman, Nadim Kotesh, Abu Dhabi via Washington, Yonit Levi from Jerusalem. Thank you all very much for joining and offering your views on the home front to our Policy Forum audience. Thank you for joining us at the Washington Institute. Bye-bye to all.